Welcome, bad campitarians. Glad you could come here. This is going to be, first of all, this is the first time. What? I did. Yes, it's glowing. I think it's good. No. It's a thing. Yeah. Okay. Welcome back, campitarians. I said that. This is the first time I've presented on this. I'll give you sort of a little bit of backstory, but I should, before I do that, let's actually pay the bills and thank the sponsors. I'll read their names so that it gets recorded for posterity into the video archives. There's Hero Devs, Pantheon, Tag1, Atom, KWall, Lullabot, Root ID, ZivTech, Backdrop CMS, Kalamuna, Canopy Studios, Rolling Orange, Third and Grove, The Drop Times, Fibonacci Web Studios, and actually the Weekly Drop is a media sponsor, which I'm remiss in having not gotten up there, but they're great too. Everyone should subscribe to the Weekly Drop if you don't already. So just so you know, there's three pieces to this. I'm saying this because if you start to feel like you're fading out, or you feel like checking Facebook or whatever, when we get to the core, that's when the actual stuff happens. I'm going to do the usual setup stuff before that, but I'll let you know when that is, and hopefully that'll be at, if it gets to be, what time is it now? It's 4:04. By 4:20, if we haven't made it there yet, I'll just skip ahead and start to do that, because that's the real thing. I passed around, there's 12 sort of things. You'll get the context for those. We might loop back to them. We'll sort of see. Let's see. We might as well do the intros. That's me, of course, Luke McCormick. I'm cellular on all the things, but particularly on Drupal.org. I've been building websites, as it says, since 1993, since before, before Netscape was introduced. What?
Before CSS.
Oh, yeah, way before CSS. we did things with tables, and we liked it, I'm telling you. Frames. There were all sorts of adventures in those early days. Those early days included stints at, as I say, Apple, Cisco, Accenture, Acquia. Cisco was actually the first intranet webmaster at the time, which I quit because I did my own startup like everyone was doing in the 90s. So don't take career advice from me. Like, take maybe other kinds of advice, but don't do what I did. When you have a job like that, stick with it. I have a bachelor's in science, but an engineering degree in computer science, and an MBA. Well, I'll get to that later. And I've been involved with the Drupal community since, actually the first one was I came to a bad camp when I was trying to figure out how Drupal worked, and it was so amazing to me, the reception that I got, that really kind of floored me about the community and stuff. Fun fact, like the picture here, how like social media pictures, you crop somebody out and you just get the picture yourself. That's Dries, who I cropped out of that picture. All right. And then before I dive into it, because we actually start getting into some sort of content areas, I want to give you a little insight. I'll actually go back to my opening slide just to sort of tell you where this kind of stuff came out. I've been a developer for all these years. I've been doing Drupal stuff since 2009. But I was kind of I got into Drupal under false pretenses, to be honest. I've been building, coded websites with database backends and, writing my own, SQL schemas at the beginning of things. And I looked around, I found Drupal, and I thought it was a no-code environment. I didn't really at the time, because it has all this great stuff, and we'll get to that pretty short. So I built sites all along the way, knowing I could write custom modules and do things in code, but really trying to stay away from that. It's kind of how I got into it. So, of course, I didn't last. I can do all the coding things, but I still kind of complain about it. And you'll see. So this is, I've brought that with me for a while, and finally, a year ago at DrupalCon Lille, I was talking about people. I was talking with friends about sort of just the things that we're kind of forced to do as Drupal developers, and I was kind of bitching about it, to be honest. I was the crabby business analyst talking about these things, and somebody suggested maybe I should write a book about it. I was like, that's a lot. So while I was there, I registered the domain name simplifydrupal.com. And kind of thought about it for a while, and then as kind of a test, I decided that in January of this year, this last January, I would tweet out, post, create a new idea each day for how one might simplify Drupal. That was kind of the thought, and I did, and that's kind of what brought to this. It was tough because not every day did I have a great idea. So I was I had to get them out. So kind of forced it out. And then I had a few months to think about it, and blah 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 blah. Here we are now, giving this talk for the first time. I'm already booked to give it a second time, for what it's worth, in New England Drupal Camp in a few weeks, and I submitted it to DrupalCon. We'll see what happens. All right. All right, so that's kind of the backdrop for this. So here's what I was talking about when I say I thought Drupal was a no-code, low-code environment. Because you pull it out, and you can actually prototype something that looks a lot like a site really pretty quick. I mean, the internal tools, and these aren't terribly new, but they've been improving a little bit. But Drupal 6, when I started, you had to add CCK and views at the time. But you got this really powerful structure with which to make websites that other systems didn't have. Other systems you had to create your own database schema, and create Java beans and horrible things like that, right, in order to have a website. Whereas Drupal, you turned it on, and before you even did anything, it was kind of a website that told you internet content. But still, it was good. So I thought out of the box, Drupal was looking really pretty nice. And then I discovered, and here I'm copying the famous diagram. Does anybody know, by the way, who drew that diagram? Anybody? No? I don't know. This is generally what. All right, well, I've seen it at a million Drupal conferences, and now I've made it 1,000,001 Drupal conferences where we show the Drupal cliff. Because you start out, it's going good with that box of the toys we had before. But then, oh my God, there's all this stuff that keeps building up. So others have started. Oh, and there's another side to this is, obviously a lot of these diagrams are AI generated, which I. Oh, all right, yeah. I generally use DALL-E, which is integrated into ChatGPT. And you can see the singularity approaching, just as I'll get to some stories a little bit later on. But the Turing test has long been. Do you guys know what the Turing test is? Is that is that common words, right? It was a long time ago a test that Alan Turing, a computer science guy, came up with for when we've achieved artificial intelligence. And his thought was that if you could type something at a computer and it could type back and you couldn't tell if it was a human or a computer, then we've achieved artificial intelligence. We've achieved that. We've decided that that's actually not artificial intelligence, but it's just kind of interesting that like we've totally blown past that, because talking with ChatGPT feels more like talking with a human than talking with a human often does. So, there's that. Anyway, so this slide is talking about like the other, it's not like nobody's thought about this. And in fact, Starshot. Come to the Starshot Summit tomorrow and do all the Starshot things. Drupal CMS, we call it now, is yet another attempt to try to make this stuff easier, to try to keep it from being so befuddling so quickly. There were other things. Anybody remember Drupal Gardens? That was, I thought it was kind of cool. But it was something that Acquia came out in Drupal, early Drupal 7 days, I guess, that was, Drupal out of the box, like a Drupal-driven Squarespace kind of thing, where a service like that. Kind of recently, DXPR and Provis are projects, modules, themes, setups that take care of lots of, and there's others. I passed around, I don't know if you people got the cards. Probably no one has pencils or pens anymore, so that's probably useless. There we go. But that's basically, I'm looking for feedback. Like this stuff has been dribbling in my mind for the last year, and I don't think it's all terrible. I know it's not all genius, so I'm looking for feedback on what is what on the various sides of things. But that's the preview, 4:15, right on time. Now we get to the core. Core. Okay. That's not AI generated. That's just a copyright violation off the internet. All right. Just letting you know that there's 3 parts to it, as you all know, because you were here when I said that a few minutes ago. So let's almost get into it. You've seen like the pictures and the stickers. Let me give you sort of a context for how they all sort of fit together. Kind of by definition, we're here at a Drupal conference because we've managed to get things done with Drupal. So for the people in this room, these for the most part aren't blockers. Like you've gotten the current system to work with what it is. I'm not really talking to the developers. My advice here is for the people hiring developers because they're the ones that own the sites that live or die based on whether they do what they're supposed to do. They're the ones that are going to have to pay to keep them running 10 years from now if they have to keep on running. So a lot of this is kind of advice to them, to site owners, for how to manage your site. I have an MBA. I know management stuff as well as computing things. How to manage your site in a way that makes it sustainable, basically. In the session before this, I was listening to Irina describe, the upgrade from Drupal 7, but people were asking about, say, Drupal 6. Whether it's worthwhile to update a Drupal 6 site to current technology. And the general consensus seems to be no, that's too far, that's too hard, can't really be done. And I'm thinking, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm thinking, if you had followed kind of my rules, you could. You wouldn't be beholden to those little shifts in technology. The site would have been designed around kind of the fundamental core value that the content of the site delivers. And that content is probably still, those words, those pictures, those numbers, that probably still matters, right? Anyway, so let's get into this. They kind of are independent. There's themes you'll see. The very last one is the most controversial, and we'll talk about that. And then at the end, I'm hoping to have like a spirited discussion to kind of find out, am I right about anything? Like, I honestly don't know. Talking to people, they seem kind of warm to stuff, but people will just be nice to you when they're talking to one-on-one. So let's get to it. All right. This one, sort of sounds simple. Prioritize simplicity. I've stared at this like 100 times wondering, is that really how you spell prioritize? I don't know, but, I guess it is. And the point is that this actually comes from, life as a business analyst, where I've espoused things and found it kind of uphill battle. People talk about, should we do this or should we do that? And I'm like, well, this one's a lot more complicated. Why don't we just, do we really need to have that particular bell and whistle? Why don't we just do it the simple way? And I found a lot of resistance. People are psyched. Oh, we can do this. We can, run this filter scripts. We're about to get into things where people will be sticking AIs to do like more and more crazy things, right? So there's gonna be a lot of stuff that's possible, and sometimes you have to do weird, hard things. Sometimes you need a chainsaw to get the job done. But it's a sandwich. If the knife cuts it, then even if you have a chainsaw, don't use it. Just use the knife. It'll be easier to clean. It won't cut your fingers off. That kind of stuff. Here's where I start to get a little mean. Sorry. Because you guys, you developers, are these people wearing hoodies in the back that I'm trying to give strength to the soulless business dude at the front there to say, look, it's okay, it's your site. Make sure that the thing that your site does is paramount, that your content is taken care of, and we'll get in a little bit a few slides later as to what taking care of the content means. But basically, don't let the inmates run the asylum, and we'll see that a few times. And I hope I don't offend anybody, because a lot of we're the inmates, and I'm that too. I'm the inmate too. So I actually include myself in that. I want to be the oppressed. I don't really want to be, but I think the site owner there should oppress me and should insist on the things that I'm going to ask for later.
I'm just glad I took my sweater off just a few minutes ago.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
Before you go on to the next slide,
Yeah.
that last bullet point, who understands best what is going to make maintenance and upgrades in the long run go more smoothly?
Yeah.
It's me, the inmate.
Oh, yeah.
So you have to balance, the person who owns the site knowing that it's for their benefit and demanding that from the people running the site, with accepting their advice and their expertise when appropriate.
Absolutely. And we'll reinforce that point later. It's the kind of notes that as I get better, I don't get better. As I end up doing this again in the future, I want to make sure to clarify things that are in my head, but that didn't necessarily make it into the presentation yet. That's coming. What we don't want is for the guy in the seat to throw stuff over the wall, to be... in fact, actually, the next slide might answer some of this question. Okay, this actually comes to it. In fact, if I was paying you to be a shill, it couldn't have been any better, because here's the thing. We've all heard site builders. Dries, for the last 3 or 4 or 5 Dries notes, has kept talking about the importance of site builders. But I think the message doesn't necessarily get through. I hear site builders described all the time as beginning developers. Oh yeah, you start off as a site builder, and then once you learn some things, then you become a developer. And I don't think that's the right call. So note the characteristics that I, say, talking to the site owners, what my advice for why you put a site builder in charge of the site. They're not an agency. They're not a short-term contractor. They're somebody that you expect to be there for a while because they are the one that understand, or there could be more than one, but that role is, the executive producer of the site. I'm drifting to, I might be using film terminology wrong. I would say that could be totally the wrong metaphor, but they're the one that understands, as I say, the market, the stakeholders, the staff. They understand the information architecture. They understand what the content is. They are very familiar with the content. They, are opinionated about the content. They, fight with the art department about how to present the content. They care. They've got strong opinions about it. They know the functions of the modules and the themes. They might not have written them. They might not even be able to understand the code. They can, doesn't hurt. But they know what they're about, and I'll get to things that get that. And I say, they don't have to be programmers. They don't have to know PHP. It doesn't hurt if they do. It's not going to necessarily get in the way. But to your point, they would understand the challenges and pitfalls of upgrade process. They would be able to talk that over with the developers about what can and can be upgraded, what's about. So they're in that role. All right. I apologize for this next slide. So that's us. There's a more flattering one coming up, But this is the crazy scientist one. This is, and standing on top of the computers. The reason why is this is more often than not the person when I've come into sites, when I come into a new site, this is the person who's in charge. Whoever knows the API the best, has been doing Drupal things the longest, has written the contributed modules, has, hacks the SQL database, at the command line on the production site. That's the person who's often in charge of the site. And they're really good at what they do. They're invaluable. We probably wouldn't have a site without them. But they don't have the empathy necessary. They don't have, it's not like a social flaw. They don't have the time to have learned all about the market and the stakeholders and all that stuff. They haven't gone into it. The site builder we have here, I try to serve a simple workman, but I'm actually, I find the site building in Drupal sites doesn't get enough love, doesn't get enough attention. People don't think hard enough about the information architecture. There aren't enough books about Drupal information architecture as there should be for how incredibly important, at least I think it is. By the way, one thing that's reassuring, even though I say don't put them in charge of the site, you can pay them the most. The gurus are hopefully hard to get, the best ones. So it is it is perfectly okay for them to be the highest paid person there, the most experienced person, the deepest things. Just, we'll get to like how we use them here. And this other thing, I'm trying, we have actually, in the Drupal world, this funny situation right now that you notice is that it's hard for Drupal people to find work right now compared to how it's been. Like, it's dried up a little bit. Agencies are having trouble finding clients to some extent. At the same time, people that need Drupal people are having a hard time finding them because the only people who they're looking for are the ones that can do everything. And I've seen this a million times when I've looked at job postings. When I was at Accenture, somebody was a hiring manager was trying to hire somebody for a Drupal project, and they had put the usual things you would expect, HTML, CSS, PHP, blah blah blah. They also had under must-haves Java, and I was like, why Java? Is there like a key integration? It's like, no, that's just that was in the last posting that I had or something like that. Like if you require that they be Java experts, you're actually gonna filter out 80% of your actual candidates that fit your other criteria. So I mean, what I'm trying to propose that we move towards to is, how many saw the movie Moneyball or read the book, but mostly the movie? All right, so I won't dig too deep into this reference, but there's a part in that where the new assistant talks about building a baseball team out of an island, the island of Broken Toys? No. Misfit Toys. Right. Not the greatest metaphor in this presentation, but the idea is that it shouldn't be necessary for every single person who's working a Drupal site to know everything there is. Like, you shouldn't have to know both, the depths of DevOps and Docker and caching and all kind of deep end things, at the same time that React and preprocessors and a million frameworks and that kind of stuff. Like it should be enough to be good at one area. Maybe a few things, but at least you shouldn't have to know everything that any Drupal site ever does, and that seems to be the common thing. All right, now here's my almost signature piece here. My little toddler going, stop! Custom modules are the thing that give Drupal a lot of its power. Everyone knows that. But they are the most expensive part of a Drupal thing, of maintaining a Drupal site. And it's like an iceberg effect, right? Like they don't add much to the initial build when they get rolled out, but you come back to them 5 years later, and it costs more to deal with them later on than it did to write them in the first place. Because, whoever wrote them knew all the stuff, knew the thing they were doing, knew why they were doing it, knew what the variables were, just plug, boom, crank it right out. Whereas coming later, you're like, what is this doing? So, if you have to build custom modules, I'm not saying you can't, but really think about it. Really see if you can do it without building custom modules. If if you do build custom modules, document them. And this is almost like a theoretical thing. Like in the project I've been involved with, I try to press the documentation, but I've never actually gotten to what I think they should be. Like, custom modules should not look like contributed modules, because contributed modules have this whole system. Custom modules, when you look at their description, when you look in their directory, there should be no surprises. You should be able to know what to do with a custom module without having to read the source code. Like that's kind of like the measure. If you have to read the source code, whoever made the module did not document it enough. And it's hard to see actually. I have sort of a monkey scribe, writing documentation here. That doesn't have to necessarily be the programmer. That doesn't necessarily, it could be the site builder, the junior programmers. You might want to divvy that up, because the expensive mad scientist people are too busy to write 3 pages of documentation for it. You get some amount of documentation that's better a lot of times in Jira. Again, good while you're building it, where every commit has a Jira ticket associated with it, and you can go to Jira to find out what it does. I've worked recently with systems where it's documented like that, and we don't have access to that Jira system. So, knowing that this module, fulfills the request in ticket 15943 is not really helping me that much. And there I am again, reading source code, trying to figure out what the heck's going on with this thing. More practically on this, I might suggest when you finish submitting a module, print out, export the description from Jira and just put it in a README with the module, so that later on down the line, you give somebody a chance to know what's going on with it. Put in the description something explaining what it does. If it's like theming module number 1, theming module number 2, or random utilities, like things that you've all seen those, no description, written them. I know you have. All right, so, by the way, just in case it's not obvious, these are not like best practices. These are not like things the Drupal community does, and this is all heresy, what I'm telling you here. These are proposals for things that we should do different than we've done in the past. Maybe. At the discussion, I kind of want to hear what you think, if any of them resonate or any of them. Here's one of my favorite tricks. I used this just a few days ago. I love that picture that that Dolly came up for me. Turn off the custom theme. If the Drupal site is designed the way they're theoretically supposed to be, you should be able to turn off the custom theme and still use it. It won't look like the thing you're used to, but you should be able to navigate to what you're doing. If there's forms you're supposed to be able to submit, if any of that stuff for finding content, doing things that the site does, if any of that disappears with when you put it into Olivero or Bartik or the admin thing, if that goes away, then you've built functionality into the theme. And that's just going to make things harder down the line. Maybe it got you through this week's status meeting, but down the line it's going to be tough. I had the first Drupal site that I ever, Drupal 8 site that I worked on was a site just when Drupal 8 was still in beta, hadn't yet released, and the programmers had learned it as their first thing. It was the first Drupal thing I ever did. And I was trying, it was a kind of sophisticated project I was working on for a big company that integrated with a fancy job system they had. And I wasn't really, like, I would run the program and I would see the display, but then I would look through the Drupal site and I didn't see, like, okay, I don't understand where it's being, like, brought into Drupal. I didn't understand where the content was. And so finally I went in and, like, crawled through the code and discovered that the entire thing was being done in the theme. That the theme was making API calls out to the system, processing in various ways, and then like creating HTML tables and the output in the theme, and then spitting it out. So, it was a worst case scenario of this. They were just using the theme as a way to get access to the PHP interpreter. It wasn't using Drupal at all. Didn't do anything. So that's the worst case. Next one. Always be migrating, especially if you're little teddy bears and robots. This kind of harkens back to Irina's talk again, where you're moving to future generations of Drupal, or maybe you move to something else. As you're building the site, integrate ways to, if you're putting content into it, figure out some way to get the content out of it other than like dumping the database tables. A database dump of a Drupal site is not really a good language, not really a good place to store your content. For what's worth, I'll make you feel. I'll do a little comparison here. WordPress, for as long as I've used it, has a little data export feature like built in. You can, and you break it with like custom fields and stuff. But like if you build a WordPress site, you can go in and spit it out into an XML file, and then pull it into WordPress or something else. I think it's very nice. I wish Drupal had that. I work a little bit with Backdrop, which you guys might be familiar with. I've been advocating for Backdrop to include that for a while. I think it's going to. I don't want to get too far deep into that. And a little bit at a time. Have you guys heard the phrase Drupalisms? Yeah. There's a working group for Drupalisms that I interact with some. There's just words that Drupal people use that mean something different when Drupal people use them than other people use them. And I won't go into the depth. I've lost I've just given up on the one that was kind of close to my heart is, Drupal people don't call site builders developers. Like in order to be a developer, it means a module builder who knows the API and is a PHP expert. They wouldn't consider Andy Hertzfield or various other people. Oh, so this is the last slide, and here's the most controversial slide. Here's like the thing that's gonna cause everybody to turn on me. And never actually done this. Is all theoretical to this one. This is like what I want to do, but no one's yet let me do this. But nevertheless, I think it's something to be considered. Is if the site builder generally has control of the site, generally knows what everything does, how all the things work. Building a module can be tough. Building a theme can be tough. There can be tricky things. Installing a module theme should not be tough, right? You put it in the folder and click install. And click uninstall when you want to remove it. So the reason I put you guys behind the glass there is because I really want the site builder, who maybe I can find one. It actually kind of looks like the same AI-generated business dude that was in the other slide. They should know what all pieces do. They should be able to take them out if they don't need them, if they don't want them. I'll give you a specific example of this. I worked on a government site a year or two ago, and they were migrating from Drupal 7 to Drupal 10. Maybe Drupal 9. I guess it's Drupal 9. And they had 70 custom modules that they were moving across. And actually, even worse, contrib modules that were no longer supported. And one of the ones that was ported is there's a contrib module that would look through your users, and anybody that hadn't accessed the site, hadn't logged in the last month, it would disable their account. I mean, that's useful if you've got 50,000 community users that are coming and going, if you've written some kind of thing like that. But this was a broadcast-only site. This was, a site where the only people the only users there were the staff of the agency. And so rather than have this module do it automatically, you accomplish the same thing by having just a recurring calendar item that shows up on your calendars at the end of the month that says, have I fired anybody this month? Do they still have an account? If I have fired anybody, make sure their account's not there anymore. That's probably taken care of. So really it was just totally unnecessary. But because no one really knew what it did when they were evaluating it, by the time I got there, they had written it, and tens of thousands of dollars, maybe more. Just these things cost so much to produce just unneeded functionality. Like if the equivalent of this person at that site had known what that module did, they would not have spent the money to have it custom made for their little bitty site. So, Eric.
On the previous slide, so site builders don't know much about config management. And
Wait, who says that?
people that are editing live sites.
No, that's not what a site builder is.
Well,
No.
maybe they should be trained, but I've run into instances where they're not committing their code changes back into the repo.
Despite his modest looks,
So site builders should know how to commit their changes back into the repo. Yeah.
they know more than if that's their shtick, right? They know every corner of that. They are experts in that.
Well, I should say, they should know.
They should know.
Oh, this is shit. No one does this yet. This is all a proposal. And
I agree.
hey, this will we're at the penultimate slide. So the deathbed here. The whole point of this is I'm trying to put forth a message of really think not about what you're doing with the site, but what the people after you who haven't met you, who don't necessarily do things the same way, don't necessarily know the same things, that weren't familiar with things before, just have mercy with those future people that are going to run across your work, so that they're not cursing you. And thank you. This last one, I kind of made up the word composability. Is that a real word?
Yes.
All right. like the thought of that. It's the same government site. I'll use another example from this. It was, if you went to the homepage, you would see it's a marketing site, describing the function of all the things, public access things. There was also, and this was a big part of the build, Facility that let people search FOIA records for stuff. I probably just gave away what site it was. Search records for things, but really a whole different functionality. It wasn't even really accessible from the menus of the main site. I mean, it was there, like, buried. But, like, it really could have been a different site. It just happened to, like, live in the same database because, you know, when they originally built it, they had the one site, and they're like, oh, let's add this feature. So they, you know, added some content types and views and forms and things like that, you know, all living in the same code base. That's okay, but, like, I'd like to think that if, you know, the dedicated site builder who is understanding the function of all the things and documenting it and thinking about the uses and the users, they would have known that these are sort of separate pieces. And, you know, the difference with that is because of those pieces, because of the custom modules they involve, because of, like, various little things that infiltrated the rest of the system, it was migrated from, you know, Drupal 7 to 9 rather than 8. You know, it missed an upgrade cycle because it was made unnecessarily harder. Like, if it was 2 sites, those 2 sites actually would have been relatively straightforward. But, like, combining them reached the critical mass of what you're able to do. All right, so this is my site where I have these things. So at the moment, all it has is the 31 ideas of varying quality that I came up with in January. Because I've been waiting for this. I've been waiting actually to. This is me kind of market testing this stuff, and in like 3 minutes, I'm about to start to hear stuff back to get a sense for how much of it to keep and how much of it doesn't make sense. But if you want to look for things, it's in there. We're at the QA section. Funny story, actually. I was talking about the Turing test of ChatGPT. I just added this, you know, like yesterday to the slide deck. And so I asked ChatGPT, originally I wanted it to show a person with a Drupal icon for a head standing in front of a firing squad. And ChatGPT said, I'm sorry, but that's more violent than I'm supposed to do. I don't want to make that image. So I found myself apologizing to ChatGPT. Oh, I'm sorry, I realize you can't do that. So, you know, why don't we do, like, you know, pitchforks chasing after a Frankenstein monster type thing. And ChatGPT like really like patted me in the back with his friend about it. It's like, oh yeah, no, that's a really good idea. That actually will get across the idea in a humorous way without the problems of your previous idea. So there you go. And you know, that's the end of the show. That's the end of the thing. I'm at the end of my time. Oh, that's
yeah. We're gonna have questions whether you're at time or not.
Poor form. All right, let it rip. Renee.
Okay, so am I getting from this, to simplify Drupal, there needs to be developer, coding people who understand back-end, front-end. Actually, there needs to be a back-end person and a front-end person. You need a builder, a person who owns the site and is responsible for it. And then you need editors, to his point. People who don't know jack about websites, but who will go in and copy and paste from Word into whatever it was he would get. Are those the 4 kinds of humans you would need in order to simplify Drupal in that way? Or can you still do the simplification part, but without all those humans?
Well, it's sort of like the role you need people filling each of those roles, and in particular, the site building role, which is the communication between like the content stakeholder people and the hardcore technical people. I think it's asking a lot of the hardcore technical people to care as much about the content as this needs. I think it's a waste of their time. I think even if they can, it's not a question of can do it. It's like if somebody is able to do like the technical magic, I don't want to distract them from that to do the touchy-feely stuff. But the touchy-feely stuff's important. I want it to, it needs to get done. And so yeah. Eric?
I just like that, depending on the size of your site and what your site is doing, there are going to be cases where somebody's fulfilling multiple roles. Someone may be the site builder and the content contributor because you're a small organization and you've only got one person who's in charge of the website for that aspect. They might need to do both roles.
Is Drupal the tool for, I only have one human in this business to do this?
It is something,
It used to be.
I would say at this point, you either need to pay someone external to manage your code if you don't have someone internal who is capable of that, or you should look eagerly for Drupal CMS or Starshot.
Yeah. With Starshot, it's supposed to be that. But by the way, this is sort of like the questions that kind of get thrown out here. But I've got other, like with Starshot and other things, I would like to see the Drupal administrative interface, for example, simplified. Like I think it's messier than it needs to be. But that's like a pointless quest with while these other things are still there. Like once we get to the point where there's kind of a role for this, then we can actually improve some of these things.
I'm just going to add on to what I said there.
Go ahead, Sharon.
If you work carefully on simplifying Drupal and don't have custom code and things like this, it is actually possible to have a site builder who can do, like on Pantheon, they can do the code update, the core and do the module updates and stuff like that. If you have someone who's able to do that and doesn't really want to spend all their time coding custom stuff, you can actually end up having one person do the entire front to back. It's a small order.
Yeah, I mean, there's pieces of. No one's going to do all of these things, right? But like, I'm hoping to sort of get any of them. If nothing else, I'd like to get to the point where we can turn stuff off. Like I talk about turning off the custom theme. Even more, I was saddened when the change was made that you can no longer disable modules. You have to uninstall them and lose the data. So that makes it harder. But nevertheless, I've been in so many situations where all the custom modules had to be turned on because nobody knew what they did, and they were all like interrelated in ways that nobody really understood. After by the time I got there, so if nothing else, I want just descriptions that kind of say what the module's doing there. In the case where I talked to you before, where there was like the system within the system. The custom modules, would have been pretty helpful if they mentioned that they were part of the system within the system. If they said that, they were handling this other piece to it. Anyone?
Well, as far as the advice to avoid custom modules is concerned, speaking as a member of the security team, I wholly endorse that.
Yeah.
And as you said, if you follow the advice, then you don't need a back-end person. So that's one fewer person.
Yeah, because basically, if you don't use custom modules, you just need someone who is capable of either themselves or making sure getting the appropriate other person, when needed, to update the standard code.
Yeah.
Which, once someone who is a site builder probably can learn how to do that if they don't already know how to do that.
So something almost nobody does this much, but this could be an outside firm.
Yeah.
I would see this person writing up specifications for the custom module they need, sending it to this expense, they can be charging $500 an hour and, crank it out and give it back. And when it's accepted, and that's, this model here, they email it to them and plug it in, it works. They know what it does. They know, they don't have to know all the pieces. They just have to know, turn it on is easy, but the more important thing is when they can turn it off. Like they know why it's there. They know that if they're deleting like this content type, and I've had that, I had a site that I was working with over the summer where it was a it had like a community element to it, and they were abandoning it. That was too hard to run. So they were continuing with the part of the site that was giving the useful information, but they were shutting down the forums. And it took a lot of work to figure out like what parts of it were supporting this piece and which were necessary for the part they were keeping. So, any more? Any additional ones? Any other? When I'll give you one that my friend Greg Marshall pulled out in DrupalCon Wheel. Is he suggested that when building content types, you know how it says you can reuse a field or you can create a new one? He says, don't ever reuse a field unless there's a reason why you have to do that. Like if there's functionality that requires the same information from the fields, do it. But if you don't know, create a new field. You're not actually saving things. But
I'd add to that, in your computer name for that field, make it clear what it belongs to.
yeah,
You might have a date on several different content types. If you have one field that's called date and another field that's called event date, people are going to not know what, which field they should use.
yeah. Well, I'm hoping, so far my simplified Drupal site has just been these 31 things that I spit out in 1 month. But honestly, I'd like to get deeper into the usability. I've added a blog feature that I haven't yet written anything to, but it's there. But I want to explore each of these things and stuff like that, and hoping to get a lively comments section and what have you. All right, is that done? We're at the end of time. I should hit the red button, I guess.